من الشيطان الرجيم. Before we start our discussion, because we hope to achieve some goodness and guidance through the process of reminding ourselves of certain realities, and because we hope to make a journey on this path toward perfection, we need to remind ourselves and we need to be aware that Shaitan, who has been expelled from God's kingdom of special mercy and who has vowed to obstruct the path of progression toward perfection, will definitely try to distract us and deviate us. And therefore in the beginning we seek to receive the special grace of Allah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Having dealt with the potential obstruction that we may face, now that we aspire to achieve some goodness and some guidance, we seek the help of Allah because of three reasons. Number one, because He is the absolute perfect being, and therefore any perfection, any goodness, any guidance that anyone hopes to achieve necessarily has to originate from Him and descend down through a variety of intermediaries before it reaches us. And secondly, we seek His help and guidance because He is Rahman. His grace, His mercy, His attention, His care reaches out to each and every entity, brings it to existence, sustains it, maintains it, provides it with everything that's necessary for its progress and development. And thirdly, we seek His help and guidance because He is Rahim. His extra love, His continuous grace, His abundant mercy is promised and available for those amongst us who believe in Him, who admit to His existence and who submit to His will. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله. And we send our salutations and our greetings and our expression of love and loyalty to the Holy Prophet of Islam, that most perfect man who managed to reach the pinnacle of perfection, the highest perfection possible for any human being because of two reasons. His understanding and comprehension of who God is, what His wonderful, beautiful names and attributes are, His infinite love, His unlimited knowledge, His majestic power, His continuous authority, His unending love and mercy, His understanding of how God continuously governs the universe with majesty and authority and love and mercy and wisdom. His understanding was the maximum possible for any human being. And secondly, that understanding was translated into action in all aspects of his life in such a way that, be it personal, be it mental, be it emotional, be it physical, be it public, be it economic or cultural or political, all dimensions of his life that the Prophet engaged in, he was the most humble and the most submissive to the will of God. And we send our salutations and greetings to his holy progeny, who were his equivalents and definitely secondary to him, and especially so on the third holy Imam, who sacrificed and created this supreme role model of a movement to create justice and godly values on the earth, thereby becoming a source of inspiration for all further movements up till the culminating global movement to establish justice and godly values on the whole of the earth. Elders in Islam, brethren in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. In our discussion, we reminded ourselves of the significance and the emphasis placed by the holy Imams in holding such gatherings and commemorating the event of Karbala. And tremendous reward has been promised, but that reward, we suggested, was predicated on the fact that we try to identify the godly values, the virtues, and try to imbibe them and integrate them in our lives. And we said that the motives of the event of Karbala can be categorized in the following manner, to say that Imam made his movement as a sign of resignation to the will of God, willingly becoming an agent and an instrument in the hands of God to execute the plan for creation. And secondly, the motive for the movement was refusal, resistance to a life of humiliation under a despotic rule. And thirdly, it was a movement for reformation in a corrupt society and to re-establish the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Sunnah of the first Holy Imam. And fourthly, in fact, there were signs that it was also a movement toward revolution. And fifthly, more important, it was part of that cosmic, historical struggle that began right from the moment the first man set foot on the earth and shall continue till the final establishment of justice, the struggle between falsehood and truth, and which is in operation even today. Before we discuss the hero of tonight, the holy personality of Abbas, son of Ali alayhi salam, in order to appreciate the contribution that this hero made in Karbala, in order for us to identify those godly values, allow me to offer a contrast. In Surah Tawbah, chapter 9, Allah refers to this process of the ongoing struggle between truth and falsehood, and the ongoing process of selection and sifting and sorting out the good from the bad, the agents from the unwanted individuals. Chapter 9, ayah number 438. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O believers, now that you've accepted that there is a God, and that God loves you, and therefore He guides you, and a part of that guidance is He has sent a leader, and that leader now wants to mobilize you toward fighting against injustice. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. What is the problem with you? ما لكم إذا قيل لكم انفروا في سبيل الله اثاقلتم. When the call is made, rise up. Rise up to fight against falsehood. What's the problem? You tend to be apathetic. You tend to gravitate down. You're not energetic. What is the problem? اثاقلتم إلى الأرض أرضيتم بالحياة الدنيا من الآخرة. Is it that the pleasures of the world have distracted you and have imprisoned you in such a way that you forget that there is an akhirah where the pleasures are much more superior? Well, let me remind you, Allah says, فَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا فِي الْآخِرَةِ فَمَا مَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا فِي الْآخِرَةِ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. The pleasures that you will enjoy here are all temporary. They're not permanent. They're all superficial. They're not profound. They're all imperfect. They're not perfect compared to the one in Akhirah. And then Allah warns, this is for your own good. When you're mobilized to become a member to execute that plan of God, and if you refuse, ayah number 39, إِلَّا تَنْفِرُوا, if you refuse, يُعَذِّبْكُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا, there is a severe, painful punishment. You go for pleasure, but that's superficial. Inside that pleasure, you know what? You are hurting your true nafs. It's your superficial animal nafs that is driving you towards the superficial pleasure. Your true nafs is seeking the actual perfection. You're hurting that. And that hurt and that suffering and that pain will manifest itself there. يُعَذِّبْكُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. There will be a painful chastisement for you. Not only that, or you've decided not to join, يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ. God will raise another people who will become eager, energetic, active members to execute this plan. وَلَا تَضُرُّوهُ شَيْئًا وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And if you think that God's plans will be thwarted, that God's plans will fail because of your laziness and failure, then remember God is powerful over everything. His plan shall be executed with or without you. This ayah is illustrated dramatically in the confrontation that takes place between Imam Hussein and Umar ibn Sa'd. A meeting in which Abbas is also present. Observe the contrast. Just before Ashura, Imam sends a message to Umar Sa'd. إني أريد أن أكلمك. I wish to discuss with you. فَالْقِنِ اللَّيْلَ بَيْنَ عَسْكَرِي وَعَسْكَرِكَ. Let's meet between my and your camp tonight. Umar Sa'd came over in a contingent of 20 people. Imam Hussein also went to confront him with a contingent of 20 companions. When they met, Imam Hussein instructed his companions to go aside. Umar Sa'd did the same thing. Imam Hussein entered the meeting place just with two individuals, his son Ali Akbar and his brother Abbas. Umar Sa'd on that side also came with his son Hafs and his slave. Imam tells him, وَيْلَكَ يَا ابْنَ سَعْدٍ أَمَا تَتَّقِ اللَّهَ الَّذِي إِلَيْهِ مَعَادُكَ. Umar Sa'd, you are a Muslim, therefore you believe in God, and therefore you believe that God is all powerful, therefore He's going to bring you back to life, therefore He is going to take to account. Aren't you afraid of the day of reckoning? أتقاتلني وأنا ابن من علمت. Do you wish to fight with me and kill me, and you know whose son I am? You believe in the Akhirah. You believe in the Prophet. Listen, let me make a proposal. ذَرْ هَؤُلَاء. Abandon them. ذَرْ هَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ وَكُنْ مَعِي. I'm making a proposal, an invitation. Come and join me. فَإِنَّهُ أَقْرَبُ لَكَ إِلَى اللَّهِ. All of us desire to reach perfection, whether we know it or not. We may think perfection is in money, in power, in prestige, in popularity, in possessions. We may think so, but our original desire for perfection will actually and really be satisfied only and only if we attach ourselves to the absolute perfect being. I'm inviting you, join me towards that perfection. Look at Umar ibn Sa'd's response. He says, I've got a place, I've got a house, and I'm worried if I join you, it's going to be destroyed. So Imam tells him, Ana abniha lak. I'll make arrangements. You'll get another house for yourself. Umar Sa'd says, well, I've got possessions. I'm afraid it'll all be confiscated. Imam says, Ana ukhlifu alayk. I will replace them for you. I've got better possessions that I've left behind in Medina. Umar Sa'd says, well, I've got people to take care of. I've got family members. Incidentally, Umar ibn Sa'd was the son of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, one of the companions of the Prophet, who converted to Islam in his old age, who was apparently a supporter of Imam Ali alayhi salam, but nevertheless never made bay'ah. He had his own claims to power. And when he died at the age of 90, he left behind 36 children from a dozen wives, from 11 wives that he managed to marry in that almost a century of life that God granted him. Umar Sa'ad says, I've got a huge family to take care of. Imam says, it seems you've got one excuse after another. I'm inviting you toward perfection. You keep on telling me, oh, I've got possessions and I've got people to take care of, I've got a place to take care of. Let me tell you, malaka. It seems there is no hope for your guidance now. Well, let me warn you. As the Quran said, Allah gives an opportunity for each one of us to actualize our desire for perfection. If we mistake the identity of where our perfection lies, and then we begin to move against the forces of the universe, which is all moving toward perfection, then those forces, by divine decree, will then come back and create pain and punishment for us. And Imam says, I am warning you of suffering at 3 levels. One is immediate punishment here in the dunya, and one, a delayed punishment in the dunya, and a third one in the akhirah. As far as the dunya is concerned, ما لك إني لأرجو ألا تأكل من بر العراق إلا يسيرا. You hope to gain some huge land and become a governor somewhere. Well, let me tell you, you'll never be granted that immediately. On a delayed basis, the punishment that you will suffer, ذبحك الله على فراشك عاجلا. In this world, you shall die a death of indignity. And thirdly, in the akhirah, لا غفرك الله يوم حشرك. The day you are resurrected back to meet your Lord, a Lord who invited you to perfection, but you refuse the offer, that Lord will manifest himself with punishment. Contrast is Abbas. His nephew, the 4th holy Imam, describes Abbas in the following terms. Rahimallahu ammi al-Abbas. May Allah grant his special grace and mercy, unlimited mercy, to my uncle Abbas. You know why? فَلَقَدْ آثَرَ وَأَبْلَى وَفَدَّى أَخَاهُ بِنَفْسِهِ. Because Abbas struggled, because Abbas sacrificed, because Abbas sublimated his own selfish desires for the sake of his brother Hussein alayhi salam. حتى قطعت يداه, till both his arms were severed off. Of course, Allah in his mercy, فَأَبْدَلَهُ اللَّهُ بِهِمَا جَنَاحَيْنِ. Allah grants him 2 wings in Jannah. As we said before, wings are a perfection for animals. Inasmuch as a wing performs a particular task for the animal, metaphorically, when we are told that a certain person or a martyr has been granted a wing, it's a perfection appropriate to that level of higher existence in that realm of bliss in Jannah that Abbas will be granted. Not only that, it seems the supreme sacrifice that Abbas made, that sublimation, that struggle, that subjugation of his selfishness, that contribution of all that he had for his brother, it enabled him to attain a particular station of perfection, which Imam describes in these words. He says, وَأَنَّ لِلْعَبَّاسِ عند الله تبارك وتعالى منزلة. He's got a particular station before God. God the all-perfect being, and therefore the one who's nearer to him is more perfect. He's got a station near him. يغبطه بها جميع الشهداء يوم القيامة. All martyrs will envy that post and position. Question: what is it that Abbas can teach us? What godly value? I want to suggest one virtue and one value that stands out prominently in the contribution that Abbas made is that of sacrifice, is that of sharing, is that of sublimating and subjugating his desires for the sake of the higher good. It is a process of overcoming one's selfishness and individualism. Individualism, that's the key word. We're living in a world where the Western thinkers are telling us that history has ended and now the last man is going to be alive. Francis Fukuyama has written a book entitled, is an American political scientist, entitled The End of History and the Last Man. End of history, all the historical struggles which man could ever make to establish a government which could ensure maximum prosperity, all those struggles have ended. Capitalism, liberalism, oh, it's triumphed with the collapse of communism. History has ended. The last man now is alive. The man who is market economy oriented, the man who is liberal minded, the man whose economy, whose politics, whose ethics, whose religion is based on individualism. Allow me to offer a brief overview of this state of our society. Professor David Myers, an American sociologist, social psychologist, had written a book back in the 20th century, printed in the year 2000, The Paradox of America. He discusses the issue of individualism. He says, post-Renaissance in the history of Europe, almost all Western cultures accepted the idea of individualism, whereby what is supreme and what is most important is what I feel and what I think is right. Religion, what I interpret to be right. Ethics, what I feel is good or bad. Politics, it's the individual who has more right than the society. He says that popular psychology promoted individualism in the form of these cliches. He quotes, don't accept authority, question authority, challenge authority, individualism. Do your own thing. If it feels good, do it. Be true to yourself. I owe it to myself. Personal fulfillment. Seek your own bliss. Shun and avoid conformity. Don't force your values on others. Assert and demand your personal right. Personal right to own guns, personal right to sell pornography, personal right to be able to run your business without any regulations. Enron? Oh, Enron scandal is one. There are thousands of others which are successful. Individualism. Protect your privacy. The executives should be paid more. Personal incomes have priority over the common good. Individualism. In order to love others, first love yourself. Listen to your heart. Solo spirituality has preference over communal, collective religion. Individualism manifesting itself in the spirit of become self-sufficient. This individualism, incidentally, capitalism is proud of its achievements. Myers quotes, he says that if you look at the American society in the post-World War II era, beginning from the 60s up until the end of the 20th century, there were tremendous achievements in America itself. Medical technology, the scourge of the sexually transmissible disease, AIDS, we managed to control them. The national budget, it was going into surplus. Remember, I'm talking about the 90s because the book was published in 2000. Costs and prices went down. Cars became cheaper. Gasoline was cheap. Hamburgers were cheap. America was making progress. Inflation went down. The dollar became strong. The stock market, oh, it was rising to the dizzying heights. Alcohol. He said, interesting, during these last decades of the 20th century, alcohol, hard liquor consumption also went down. Fatal, drunken driving went down. Employment was up. Joblessness was down. Though the population doubled in that period, food production tripled. Not only that, food became cheaper also. And he lists down various achievements. However, he warns, despite all these achievements, we had problems. Before I discuss those problems, let me quote a little more about his explanation of the effects of individualism. He says a survey that was conducted of the IBM employees across the world found out that the most individualistic cultures in the world are the American, followed by the Australians. It'll be interesting to find where the British stand on this spectrum. He quotes the French sociologist who visited the United States about a century and a half ago. At that time, he discovered streaks and strains of individualism. And he says a similar survey was conducted just recently towards the last years of the 20th century, and a similar finding: individualism is strongly embedded in the American and Western culture. Look at the manifestations. Literature, for example, if you look at the literature, he quotes a book and he quotes one statement that the hero makes in that story, which epitomizes the ideal of individualism. The hero is reported to have said, "I do not recognize anyone's right over even 1 minute of my life. I'm a free bird. I'm a man who does not exist and live for others. I live for myself." That's the literature that was being propagated. He says if you look at the effects of individualism in various levels of society, for example, in popular psychology, Carl Rogers, he mentions an example of a psychologist who promoted individualism. His psychology was that every individual faces one basic question. The most important question an individual has to answer for himself is, am I living in a way which is deeply satisfying to me, and in a way which truly expresses the me, myself? And the movement of self-esteem, that individuals, that if children, that if young adults are suffering unruly behavior, they're unpopular, they're underachieving, they've got problems. If you trace and if you analyze their problems, you'll come and discover that there's a deficit in their self-esteem. Their individualism needs to be boosted. And he challenges this self-esteem movement that took ground in the United States and spread over. He quotes several psychologists, Damon and Dawes and Leary and Baumeister and Martin Seligman. And they're saying that this self-esteem movement, as an expression of individualism, perhaps is fatally flawed. You know, sometimes you mistake the effect for the cause. Maybe the disturbed behavior is not as a result of low self-esteem, rather the other way around. It's the disturbed behavior that's causing the low self-esteem. And he says perhaps the solution to that then is to boost his esteem by encouraging him to begin to make hard-won achievements. That will boost his self-esteem. Rather than saying, every day when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, oh, I'm terrific. Oh, every day I'm getting better and better. Well, that's all false, superficial propaganda for self-deception. And he warns individualism, manifesting itself as self-esteem, has one potential problem. It has a dark side also. This phenomena that we see, that teenagers are beginning to engage in sexual activity even at lower and lower ages, the fact that you have gang leaders, the fact that you have even terrorists, is that if you would psychologically analyze them, you find their self-esteem is not low, it seems it's above average. And finally, he says, he quotes from Baumeister, he says, perhaps there is no psychologist who has published more work about self-esteem than myself. And I have reached the conclusion that some people with high self-esteem, in fact, can be very obnoxious. They are likely to interrupt discussion. They are likely not to talk with the people, but they will talk at the people, in contrast to that person who's modest and who's shy and who's self-effacing. My conclusion, Baumeister says, that self-control is worth 10 times more than self-esteem. Notice in the previous discussion we said that esteem in Islam, self-esteem in Islam, is not based on saying, oh, I am the great one and I am terrific and I get better every day, better and better. Self-esteem in the Quranic perspective is directly related to our relationship to God. Because I'm created by God, because God is proud of my creation, because my prestige is in obedience to God, therefore I enjoy self-esteem, not because of my own selfish individualism. He then talks about psychotherapists encouraging individualism. People have problems, and as a solution to their problems, they don't go for salah, for prayers, for dua. Oh, they go to psychotherapists, the new prophets of our age. And these prophets, you know what they tell these poor clients? You got problems? Let me teach you a mantra. Let me teach you a prayer. Your prayer is, I do my thing and you do your thing. I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations. You are not in this world to live up to my expectations. I am I, you are you. And if by chance we just happen to meet each other, well, that's good. But if not, I'm not bothered. Naked, rugged, selfish individualism. That's the prayer of the prophets of our age, the psychotherapists. And then he brings up studies which have been conducted to compare certain cultures which are not individualistic, some cultures which are collectivistic. He says there are cultures in Africa and in Asia, in Central America, in South America, which are collectivistic in fact. He says if you compare, let's say, in the East, you won't find people writing an autobiography. They'll be writing a family history. You won't find an advertisement in the East, in collectivistic societies, where they would appeal to individual interests. She's got a style all her own. That's individualism. In comparison, you'll find an advert in the East collectivist society which would say, we have a way of bringing people close together. Promotion of the collectivistic lifestyle. Compare American school children with school children from the East. Individual, stylish clothing. No standard uniform. This was written in the year 2000. He says President Clinton at that time also encouraged that American schools should now introduce uniforms as a way to bring about more civility and less violence in American schools. Remind yourself of Columbine. And he says in the East, if you were to ask, and if you were to promote this cliche, be true to thine own self. I owe it to myself. The Eastern man will ask you which self? Self with friends, self with family, self with workers. There's no self who is totally selfish. Self in a group, self in companionship, collectivistic society. And he says you find the individualistic societies, divorce rates are higher. Marriage is to serve me, not that I have to serve the marriage ideal. I have a priority over the welfare of the spouse and children. The number of people who respond to surveys where they say if the two are somehow unhappy, for the sake of the children, should they maintain their marriage, the number of people who say no is rising. Total reflection of individualism. Child rearing, individualism, the way it shows itself in child rearing. He says if you look at the Western home, the adolescent resents parental supervision of who the boyfriend would be or who the girlfriend, or what time should I come back home, of the privacy. I want my own private room and you have no right to open my mails. When they go to the restaurant, the parents order something else, the children order something else. You look at their schools, they are taught about values clarification. Reject authority of the parents, reject authority of the priests, reject authority of the political authority. It's your person who should clarify values for yourself and decide what your future is. He goes on to then talk about feminism, the daughter of individualism. I'm not going to discuss that. That's another topic all by itself. Let me skip that section. Having discussed the variety of the manifestations of individualism in the Western society, he then asks this question: where did individualism come from? What promotes individualism? He's got a few factors that he identifies. He says America is a place where it's not like Japan where you have 99% all of them Japanese. In America you have people from different cultures, and each culture has got its own interest. So individualism was necessary for the survival there. Secondly, he says the European mind and the Western mind is colonialist oriented, ready to leave home and family and church and community and go and do your own thing. It's the Europeans who colonized, not the Japanese, for example. And he talks about the factors which bring about individualism. In history, he says, human societies moved from a stage of hunter and gatherers to become farmers, and then from agriculture they moved to urbanization and industrialization. And one of the problems of urbanization is it promotes individualism. He says simple tests were conducted. He says you go and walk on the street and you say that I want to test the helpfulness of individuals. So in 36 different cities in the United States, they went and conducted tests on strangers. Their degree of readiness to help. Suppose a pen drops and the person is blind. Which of the bypasses is ready to help? Or, I want some change, could you help me please? Or, there's a blind man standing at a corner, who's ready to help him? And they found that smaller the city, less densely populated the city, more the readiness to help. Larger the city, more urban life, less of the readiness to help. He concludes that in smaller towns, the rural folk, they're more willing to receive a message and to relay it, to post and to mail a lost letter, to cooperate with interviewers, to help a lost child, to do small favors. Because it's a small community. People know each other. They're more helpful. They're more collectivistic. And finally, he identifies one major factor that promotes individualism, and that's affluence. For example, he says affluence affords you to bring a television at home. It's amazing. He says, true television brings the whole world into your living room. But there's another devastating effect of the television. Not only does it bring the whole world into your room, it takes you out of the whole world and confines you to your living room. You're no longer in contact with your community and your companions and your friends anymore. It's your television. Oh, Your children have their own television now. And he talks about affluence, which affords an individual self-sufficiency and therefore no need for a community. And finally, it's the economy, it's the market-oriented economy which promotes individualism. Let me finish this discussion by this quotation. Francis Fukuyama, once again, he says, capitalism, it places self-interest above moral obligation. Capitalism is endlessly innovative. It brings new technologies all the time. It replaces one technology with another technology. Thereby, it destroys the bonds which keep the community together, which were built up over centuries. All those bonds are now gradually being broken. One of the biggest problems with individualism and capitalism spreading is family fragmentation. And he says that, you know, the end result, greed is seen as a good thing. Selfishness is seen as a good thing. Now the human community has got only one thing that keeps them together, that naked greed, self-interest. That's the bond for social cohesion. It's interesting. He says in a survey that was conducted of economic theoreticians, economic professors, a national survey was conducted. The readiness to contribute, the readiness to overcome selfishness. Economic professors, he says, earn a high salary, but they're twice likely than their other counterparts from other disciplines not to contribute to charity. Students who have been exposed to a course in economics, later on when they're asked for charity, they're found to be more reluctant. Market economy as a factor that promotes individualism. Let me conclude. Myers, Professor David Myers, says that true capitalism has enabled us to achieve a lot of progress. Medical technology and the dollar becoming strong and things becoming cheaper and food production rising, all that's very good. But at the same time, it has taken its toll on our social fabric. He says in the same period that we have achieved so much, the divorce rates have doubled. In the same period that we have achieved so much, teenage suicide rates have tripled. In the same period, with all this economic progress, the rates of violent crime has quadrupled. In the same period, what has happened is the prison population has quintupled. In the same period, what has happened is the number of children born to unmarried, unwed parents has sextupled, 6 times. In the same period, what has happened is the number of couples who are ready not to get married but to live together, cohabitation, it has increased 7-fold. Worst, the rates of depression compared to the beginning of the 20th century and the end of the 20th century have increased 10-fold. Individualism leaves you to your own powers. No family, no friends, no God, nobody. And for whatever reason, if you fail, you are doomed to disaster. Depression 10 times has increased in societies. Let's come back to our hero for tonight. I said one significant feature which of Abbas has been emphasized by our imams is precisely this ability to sacrifice, to struggle and to subjugate the individualism to its final limit, to its maximum extent. Observe. Look, let me just quote one ziyarah. For example, the 6th holy imam is reported to have taught us that we should recite this ziyarah. The ziyarah that we recite after Warith in Warith, Ziyarat Warith, how do we address Abbas alayhi salam? فَنِعْمَ الْأَخُ الْمُوَاسِي. Muwasat is the same process of being able to share, to contribute, to give up your own individualism for somebody else's sake. Allow me to illustrate the significance of overcoming individualism as portrayed in the Holy Quran. In Surah Baqarah chapter 2, contribution of whatever God has given you for the sake of the common good, for the sake of God's pleasure. Chapter 2, Surah Baqarah, ayah number 274. Allah says, Alidina yunfiquna amwalahum, those who spend whatever God has given them, their possessions, bil-layli wan-nahari, be it the nighttime, be it the daytime, all times, sirran wa alaniyatan, be it in private, be it in public, at all places, at all times. You know what? فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. God has promised an award for them. لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. They shall suffer no sorrow and no sadness. They will never experience a sense of loss. True, they've given out. Why will they suffer no sense of loss or regret or sadness or sorrow by parting with their wealth? How do they overcome their individualism? Amazing. There's an ayah in Surah Saba, chapter 34, ayah number 39, where Allah says that those who give in the way of God, قُلْ إِنَّ رَبِّي يَبْسُطُ الرِّزْقَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ وَيَقْدِرُ لَهُ. Allah has the power to provide or to hold back as much rizq and provision that He wills out of His wisdom fit to give to anyone. However, وَمَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَهُوَ يُخْلِفُهُ. Whatsoever, be it little, be it large, that you spend in the way of God, God replaces it. When? One of the great scholars we have in the Hausa has got a beautiful illustration. He says, imagine you go to the river, you pick up one handful of water. When is that handful of water replaced? Instantaneously. The ayah says, وَمَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَهُوَ يُخْلِفُهُ. You know why? Because وَهُوَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. Continuously, moment by moment, there is a flood of grace and rizq and provision coming down. And it reaches every individual according to their own measure. Even a small amount picked up, immediately is replaced. You may not realize it, but it's happened. Your eyes will open later on. This is one ayah. The Quran doesn't stop there. The Quran goes ahead. Chapter 2, ayah number 261. مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ حَبَّةٍ أَنْبَتَتْ سَبْعَ سَنَابِلَ فِي كُلِّ سُنْبُلَةٍ مِئَةُ حَبَّةٍ. The parable of he who spends in the way of God, whatever God has provided him, not only his material possessions, even his prestige, even his power, not only his treasures, but even his time, not only his time, but even his talents, whatever expertise, whatever experience, whatever I can share, whatever God has given me, not necessary wealth, whatever God provides me. If I spend in the way of God, God promises in return. The example of one seed planted, that seed gives out 7 shoots, in each shoots 100 seeds. 1 multiplies to 700 times. No, Allah doesn't stop there. The ayah says, Wallahu yudha'ifu liman yasha. Whosoever He wills, and He sees, yes, this individual deserves it because of his sincerity, because of the scope of his contribution, because of the permanence of the contribution, Allah can double, not 1 rewarded by 700 times, 1 by 1400 times. No, that is if you interpret yudha'ifu liman yasha as double. It could be multiple. It could be triple. 1 gives not 700. Not 1400, gives 2100 times. No. Wallahu yudha'ifu liman yasha, multiple fold. No, you have placed limits on God's grace. Wallahu wasi'un alim. God is wasi'. There is no limit. 700, 1400, 2000, 100, that's your limited mind that wants to count. God is the creator of your mind, and the power to think, and the thought that comes. Your thinking and your thought, all is from God. And God can give you even beyond what you can ever think. Question, to what degree are you sincere? Question, to what scope and vision you had in your contribution? Question, to what time period did you plan the effect of your contribution? There are a variety of factors which will then determine the degree of reward that we can deserve. You go to the ocean, how much can you take from there? It all depends what is the capacity of the vessel that you take to the ocean. There's no limit in the ocean. Not only God awards, chapter 2, ayah number 274. God awards multiple fold, chapter 2, ayah number 261. No, God awards not only here, but in the hereafter. Chapter 3, ayah number 92. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. Another element in the contribution is now being introduced. It's not the extra that I have, that I want to share. No. God says, you shall not attain any goodness, any godliness, any gardens in paradise, but if you begin to part with that which you like and love. No, the Quran goes even beyond that. Surah Hashr, chapter 59, ayah number 6, Allah describes the wonderful state of sacrifice that was displayed by the Ansar in Medina when they received the Muhajirin who had left everything behind in Mecca. They left behind their homes, they left behind their possessions, they left behind their business, they left behind everything. They came empty-handed to Medina. Look at the description of the reception which the Ansar gave to the Muhajirin. Chapter 59, ayah number 9. وَالَّذِينَ تَبَوَّأُوا الدَّارَ وَالْإِيمَانَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Remember the people who were in Medina before you came, the Muhajirin. يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ. They're very welcoming to these newcomers, to these guests who have come over now. 1. 2. لا يجدون في صدورهم حاجة مما أوتوا. The Islamic State at certain stages has got extra bounties, but when it distributes, it gives more, not equally, gives more to the Muhajir. The Ansar feels no regret, feels no sadness that he has been given less. No, the sense of sacrifice is even more than that. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Not only do they not ask to be given a share of the pie, whatever they have, they're ready to give. No, not the extra they have. Whatever they even may need, they're ready to give. That's what Allah is praising here. وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. You know why? Whosoever now overcomes his selfishness, his individualism, truly he is the one who has achieved perfection. Not only God promises an award, 1, as in chapter 2, ayah number 274. Not only does he promise an award which is multiple fold up to an extent that we cannot imagine the limit. 2, as mentioned in chapter 2, ayah number 261. Not only does he mention that this award is conditional on us sacrificing what we like, he says prosperity and perfection is predicated on us giving out what we love. No, the pinnacle of contribution which the Quran describes is in Surah Dahr of the Ahlul Bayt. one of whose members was Abbas. In order to appreciate Abbas's contribution, let me just quickly draw your attention to Surah Dahr, chapter 76, ayah number 5 onwards. The whole surah has 31 verses. Almost 3/4 of the surah discusses the act of contribution and the reward that Allah has promised. Beginning from ayah number 5 on to ayah number 22 is the description of this event. إن الأبرار يشربون من كأس كان مزاجها كافورا. There are some people who are so virtuous that they are being promised on the day of judgment that they shall drink from one which has a flavor of kafur. We need to remind ourselves of one basic fact. The pleasures that we will experience in that realm of existence is beyond our imagination. Remember what Allah says in Surah Alif Lam Mim Sajda chapter 32. He says that Allah is going to reward us with that which even our minds cannot imagine. Kafur is camphor. Camphor is an antidote to several poisons. Perhaps when God tells us that these people will enjoy a drink which has the flavor of camphor as a representation of a drink that once a person takes it, all the poisons of those carnal, lowly animal desires are overcome. It's an antidote to all these potential poisons. It's a supreme drink. We cannot imagine its full effect. عيني يشرب بها عباد الله يفجرونها تفجيرا. This is a spring that these special servants of God shall be granted. What is a spring? Something that keeps on bubbling, something that keeps on flowing. Surah Yasin chapter 36, ayah number 54, Allah says, وَتُجْزَوْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ الْيَوْمَ لَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا. Today, nobody will be denied his right. وَتُجْزَوْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Whatever you did, you shall be awarded accordingly. These people shall be awarded an ever-bubbling, ever-flowing spring. An indication that in their lives in the dunya, they were ever-bubbling, ever-providing, ever-contributing, which then manifests itself in that form of a spring. يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ. Oh, what a wonderful description of a spring and a drink. Who are these people? Well, God now describes the people. يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ. They fulfill their obligations. They know that there is a God, one. God who loves them and therefore wants to guide them. Two, in His guidance, He has obligated them to do some things. Three, they have recognized that and they fulfill their vows. يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا كَانَ شَرُّهُ مُسْتَطِيرًا. And they fear a day where the majesty and the displeasure and the wrath of God will manifest itself in its full fury. And they are aware and therefore apprehensive of that day. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. This state of mind, that fulfilling one's obligation, this state of mind whereby I am aware and therefore apprehensive of the majesty of God, that motivates them now to contribute to a miskin who is needy, to a yatim who is an orphan, to an asir, a captive. In a Muslim state, a captive is only a kafir. Ala hubbihi, despite having desperate need, not need, desperate need to something, yet they parted with it for the sake of God. That's the pinnacle of contribution, as manifests itself again in the form of Abbas also, as we shall observe. إِنَّا نَخَافُ مِنْ رَبِّنَا يَوْمًا عَبُوسًا قَمْطَرِيرًا. And then beginning from ayah number 10 till ayah number 20, there is a description of the award that Allah gives to them. لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. When we contribute to you, we don't ask for any appreciation. We don't ask for any acknowledgement. We don't want any gratitude. They didn't ask for acknowledgement. You know what God did? Beginning from ayah number 11 down to ayah number 21. Almost 10 different awards are promised to them. And then towards the end, Allah says, إِنَّ هَذَا كَانَ لَكُمْ جَزَاءً وَكَانَ سَعْيُكُمْ مَشْكُورًا. You didn't ask for acknowledgement and appreciation from your recipient, but Allah does recognize your efforts. Allah does record them, and Allah does reward them. The same sense of sacrifice which the Ahlul Bayt did trained a person like Abbas, who then manifested his sacrifice on the day of Ashura. Allow me to illustrate his contributions and his sacrifice. We all know that he was in charge of the security of the camps. He was one of the closest individuals to the Imam. Indeed, if Habib bin Madahir was appointed to the contingent on the left, and if Zuhair ibn Qayn was appointed to the contingent on the right, Abbas was the flag bearer in the center. Before Ashura, on the eve of Ashur, when Shimr ibn Dhil Jawshan arrives in Karbala, he comes and offers immunity to Abbas and his brothers. Abbas had 3 other brothers from al-Banin, Abdullah and Uthman and Jaffer. Shimr ibn Dhil Jawshan comes outside the camp and he shouts, Aina banu ukhtina? Where are the brothers of our sister? Where are the sons of our sister? They are our nephews. We want to see them. None of the brothers responded. Imam Hussein said, no, if he's calling you, go and listen to him. They all went out to find out what he wants to say. He said that, Antum aminun, I've come to grant you immunity. فَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ مَعَ أَخِيكُمُ الْحُسَيْنِ. Why do you want to join in the company of Imam Hussein and get killed with him? أَلْزِمُوا طَاعَةَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Come, it's very simple. Switch over the camp. Come into the obedience and the allegiance of Yazid and you've got immunity. The brothers keep quiet. Abbas responds, Tabban laka ya Shimr. Woe be to you, O Shimr. La'anakallah. May Allah deprive you of His special mercy. وَلَّعَنَ مَا جِئْتَ بِهِ مِنْ أَمَانِكَ هَذَا. What is this offer that you're making to us? We have recognized who God is. We have recognized who God's guide is. We have recognized our guidance and salvation is in following Him. Your immunity has no value in our eyes. Shimr was not an ordinary person. That was an insult to him. Shimr was the same man who, when Umar ibn Sa'd was making efforts and attempts to reach a compromise, he reached a point where he tells Ibn Ziyad that these letters of compromise that Umar Sa'd is suggesting, don't listen to them, it's dangerous. The man is in your clutches. You let him go now, he's going to get more supporters. You're going to get into more big trouble. If he is not going to listen to you, Umar Sa'd says, Umar Sa'd, allow me. And Ibn Ziyad replies back to Umar Sa'd, either you kill or you allow Shimr ibn Dhil Jawshan to take over. Shimr was not an ordinary person. He was the head of a contingent of 4,000 people. Shimr was close to the governor. Shimr was a man who terrorized people. Shimr had people under his control. And yet you have 4 young people who said no to him. The man was angry and frustrated, and he went back. On the day of Ashur, before the battle began, the initial attempt took place on the 9th day. In the afternoon of the 9th, suddenly when they were resting, they heard the army coming over. Umar Sa'd had given the instructions, let's launch an attack. Immediately Imam Hussein sent a contingent. Habib bin Madahir, Zuhair ibn Qayn, Abbas and the others, they went to meet the contingent. What is your problem? We want to launch an attack. Either you submit and subjugate yourself or you die. Abbas said, wait, I have to consult with the leader. He came back, he inquired from Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein said, go back to them and request for respite. Go back to them and ask them that we want just one night. Just one night of rest. That's the eve of Ashura. Abbas comes back and tells them, we're ready to discuss. Allow us time. Let's clarify our thoughts. By tomorrow we will let you know what our position is. He doesn't tell them we want time for the Quran and for the dua and for the salah and for istighfar, which was the actual reason. These people would never have understood that. Abbas wins time by telling we are ready, but allow us time to think about it. We'll let you know our decision tomorrow. And the contingent goes back, discusses with Umar ibn Sa'd. Umar Sa'd brings his consultants. What do you say? And one of them says, well, I swear if the enemy who was a kafir came to ask you for respite for one day, you would have granted it. This is the son of the daughter of the Prophet asking you for respite. Aren't you not going to grant it? And yet another consultant said, the matter is finished. We will overwhelm them. Let them take a night. Doesn't matter. And then one of their representatives comes over and announces that the Amir, the governor, has announced that you have been granted respite. But tomorrow either you submit or you get killed. Abbas, on the day of Ashur, after all the other companions had fallen, and there was no one remaining now, comes to seek permission from Imam. Imam initially refuses. Imam says, you are the close one, you are the last one. You are the support of the whole camp. We cannot easily part company with you. And Abbas says, I cannot continue living a life whereby I keep on seeing the enemy increasing in his advance. This life is miserable for me now. I have to make an uprising. Finally, Imam grants him that permission, but with the condition that you go and get some water. Get some water for the young ones. The young ones are thirsty. The young ones need something to survive with. Abbas proceeds. There's almost an army of 400 people or more around the river. Yet with his bravery, he parts them and he manages to reach the river. He fills the bags, the water bags. While he is filling the water bags and he sees the water in front of him, that test arises. Should I drink something now? I have got a responsibility. My responsibility is to take water back. I need strength. I need power. Why shouldn't I take a few drops? Get that necessary energy, and then I go back so that I'm able to deliver to the children. You know what Abbas responds to this particular thought? We would have never known but for his battle cry, Ya nafsi, Ya nafsi ba'da al-Husayni huni wala kunti ba'dahu an takuni. Oh my nafs, after Hussein, there's just a life of humiliation and disgrace. And I wish I would not see the day when Hussein is not alive. هذا الحسين وارد المنوني. Here is Hussein who is almost about to die. وأنت تشربين بارد المعين. You are thinking of drinking water by yourself. Tallahi ma hadha fi'alu dini. I swear by God, this is not the godly values by which I've been trained. Look at the individualism being subjugated and sublimated. Incidentally, from the fiqh point of view, there is nothing wrong for an individual to take strength so that he can perform the task in front of him. Question, why did he refuse to take water? Answer, maybe Because he knew now it's a question of defeat. There is no way we can overwhelm the enemy. And therefore, what difference does it make if I take a drop of water or I don't take a drop of water? One. Two, perhaps the reason he did not take water was not because there was a sense of defeat, there was a sense of duty. Perhaps he had already been trained. He had already been informed by his parents, don't drink before your master. No, no. Perhaps it was not a question of a sense of defeat, not a question of a sense of duty because he was instructed. No, even if he had not been instructed and did not feel a sense of duty, Abbas was a man who was dedicated to his master. You know, the Quran says every believer has to give preference to the likes and the dislikes of his leader, the Prophet, and now the son of the Prophet. Abbas was a man trained in the Quranic principles. He was dedicated to Imam, and therefore he did not take a drop. How could I drink before my Imam? No! Abbas enjoyed a status of proximity to God. If his father was invited in the month of Ramadan and offered a variety of food, and yet he picks up 3 morsels of food, the father. And he says, but why don't you take more? He says, I want to meet my Lord on an empty stomach. Abbas, the son, wanted to meet his Lord on a thirsty mouth. A perfection whereby you subjugate your desire of selfishness and individualism so that you can share with others, and that attains perfection for you inside you. And now he comes out of the river. There's a huge army that has failed to intercept him. Now the army is more vigorous and ferocious against him. Now Abbas displays that prowess and that valor and that bravery. Observe. La arhabul maut إذ الموت رقى نفسي لصبط النبي المصطفى وقى. You can't scare me by death. Death to me is a means to achieve perfection. My task in life is to obey the Master. I've understood that there is a God. I've understood that this God loves me. I've understood that this God has guided me. I've understood that I've got a guide. In order to establish the godly values under this guide, I'm ready to face death. 1,000 people against me, I shall plunge into death. One, not only will I plunge, I want to protect. Not only do I want to protect, I want to provide for the children. Not only that, I'm positive. I'm positive that in the akhirah there is nothing but pleasure and bliss for me. These words motivated Abbas then to strike. And reports indicate that he did manage to kill a lot of people. However, the enemy was cowardly. The enemy managed to ambush. We're told that one person came and ambushed him and chopped off his right arm. At that moment, the water bag had to be transferred to the left hand. Abbas now is in a state of pain. Abbas now is in a state of suffering. It's agony. It's excruciating pain. Does the man falter? Does the man doubt? Does the man give up? No. Look at his battle cry. He cries out, Wallahi in qata'tum yamini uhami abadan an dini an imamin sadiq al-yaqini najl al-nabiy al-tahir al-amini. If you chop off my hand, oh, what's a hand? It's part of the body. You know who I am? It's my soul. That soul has understood that there is a God. That soul has accepted that the reality is godly values are something for which we have been created. That soul has got an Imam Sadiq al-Yaqini. That soul is a follower of the Prophet who is Tahir al-Amini. What is pain? Pain can be overcome by the power of the mind reminding itself of its purpose and reminding itself of its determination. And Abbas continues with the fight, with the water bag on his left hand. But yet there are cowards. Yet that dastardly act comes and then chops off his left arm. Abbas's concern was to protect Imam. Abbas's concern was to provide for the Imam's children. At this stage, with increasing pain, with increasing suffering, he discovers now it's going to be extremely difficult and increasingly impossible to go back to the camp. Now he changes. His words and his battle cry are different now. Ya nafsi, ya nafsi. لا تخشي الكفار أبشري برحمة الجبار لا تخشي الكفار أبشري برحمة الجبار مع النبي السيد المختار. He senses death is near now. He tells himself, oh my nafs, don't be afraid of these people. They have rejected your God, and therefore God will punish them. Don't be afraid of them. Continue your fight. Oh Abbas, remind yourself of the wonderful mercy that awaits you of your Lord. You have devoted and dedicated your life for the sake of God. What are you afraid of, oh my nafs? Now, very soon, you shall be in the company of the Holy Prophet. What pleasure can there be greater for a person to leave the suffering of the dunya and to join the companionship of those perfect souls, the souls who represent the perfection of God? My nafs, don't worry, continue. Do as much as you can, continue. قَدْ قَطَعُوا بِبَغْيِهِمْ يَسَارِي. These enemies cowardly and dastardly have cut off my left arm. فَأَصْلِهِمْ يَا رَبِّي حَرَّ النَّارِ. Oh my Lord, I've got nowhere to go. I'm turning back to you. Punish them, deprive them of your special mercy. Abbas now reaches a point whereby he's already attacked from his right and on his left. Now the final blow comes on his chest. He loses balance and he falls to the ground. He cries for his brother. Assalamu alayk ya Aba Abdullah. Imam Hussein, remember, this man is the last man alive. Imam rushes to the battlefield. Just like a ferocious lion coming against a group of deer, the enemies run away. But it's too late. Abbas has fallen. When the body is brought back to the camp, there's a great sense of grief and loss in the members of the household. There's a great sense of grief and loss in Imam himself. Remember, this was a saintly soldier. This was a divine man who had devoted himself and dedicated himself all that God had given him for the sake of Allah. It was not a small loss for Imam. And therefore it's not surprising if Imam says, Al-ana in kasara dhahri wa qallat hilati. The backbone of my support of my whole camp has collapsed. Now the alternative means available for me to protect myself are dwindling fast. Wa Abbasa, wa Akha. Oh dear brother, we have lost you. Oh dear Abbas, we have given you in the way of God. And the members of the Ahlul Bayt also said, wa Akha, wa Abbasa, wa muhjata qalba. You were the apple of our eyes. You were our beloved. And we have lost you. Assalamu alayk. Look at the ziyarah we are now taught to pay our respect to this man. Assalamu alayk. Ayyuha al-abdu salih. المطيع لله ولرسوله ولأمير المؤمنين وللحسن والحسين. That was the supreme achievement of this man. Sacrifice, subjugation of his individualism and selfish desires to Allah's will, to the manifestation of Allah's will in the Prophet's command, to the manifestation of Allah's will in Imam Ali's command, in Imam Hassan's command, and finally Imam Hussein's command. Assalamu alayk ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik wa anakhat birahlik. عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقينا وبقي الليل والنهار والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Before we start our discussion, whereby we hope to remind ourselves of certain realities which can bring about potentially a change for the better and an improvement in our lives, and hence a degree of perfection, we need to remind ourselves that this journey toward perfection has potential obstacles. And Satan has vowed to attempt to deviate us from that path. And therefore we seek the protection of Allah, who is all-knowing and therefore knows our problems, and who is all-powerful and therefore can protect us, and who is all-loving and therefore willing to protect us if we earnestly and sincerely seek His protection. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Having dealt with the potential obstruction on this journey toward perfection, we ask for Allah's help to achieve any goodness and any guidance that we hope to attain in this program, because of three reasons. We believe that He is Allah, therefore the absolute perfect being, and therefore any perfection, any goodness, any guidance that will reach us necessarily has to originate from Him and Him alone, though it may reach us after passing through a variety of mediums and intermediaries. And secondly, we seek His help and guidance is because He is Rahman. His love, His care, His attention, His grace reaches out to each and everything, brings it into existence, provides it for all that's necessary for its progress toward perfection, and finally enables it to reach perfection. And thirdly, we seek His help and His guidance because He is Rahim. His continuous mercy, His abundant love, and blessings and grace are promised and available for those amongst us who believe in Him, who admit to His existence, and then who submit to His will. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين. And we send our salutations, our greetings, our expressions of loyalty, of love to the Holy Prophet of Islam, that most perfect man who managed to reach the pinnacle of perfection, the highest degree of perfection possible for any human being. Because of two reasons. Number one, his understanding and his comprehension of who God is, of how God operates, of what God's beautiful, perfect names and attributes are, of His infinite love, of His unlimited knowledge, of His continuous grace, of His majesty, of His authority, of His magnanimity, and the other beautiful names. His understanding of how God, moment by moment, is governing and running the universe toward its purpose of creation, which is perfection. His understanding was the maximum possible for any human being. All aspects of his life, be it private, be it mental, be it emotional, be it physical, be it public, be it economic sphere, be it cultural, be it educational, be it political, any dimension, in every dimension of his life, he was the most humble, the most submissive to the will of God, and therefore the chosen one. And we send our salutations and greetings on his holy progeny, who were almost equivalent to him, indeed secondary to him. And especially so on the third holy Imam, who conducted this supreme sacrifice that elevated this event of Karbala to become that historic, supreme source of inspiration for all movements to establish godly values and justice, and which will finally culminate in that global movement to establish justice on the whole of the earth. Elders in Islam, brethren in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. In our discussion about the necessity and the importance of holding such gatherings, we reminded ourselves of the various traditions narrated from the holy Imams, which promised tremendous degree of reward. And it was suggested that that degree of reward is conditional on us assembling, narrating this event, trying to identify those godly values, trying to imbibe them in our lives and integrate them and finally act upon them. That would then qualify us to deserve to receive those high levels of reward promised. And we also said that we need to remind ourselves that the motives of this movement ranged from resignation to the will of God to become an instrument, an agent in advancement of God's cause and execution of His plan. And secondly, that we need to learn to refuse and to resist against a life of humiliation under a despot that may want to dictate according to his own desires, not according to the divine laws. And thirdly, the motive which he expressed himself was that of reformation and gradual change away from vice toward virtue. And fourthly, indeed, even an attempt to bring about a revolution. And finally, the fact that this process is ongoing, and therefore even today, this process of divine selection, of divine sorting out of the good from the bad, of the agent who is wanted from the one who is rejected, is ongoing even today. Allow me to mention yet another example of a response that was elicited when Imam invited individuals to join this movement. When he arrived in Mecca, there were some well-wishers who came to advise him. The pious people in the community, the elders of the Muslim Ummah, do not make this uprising. It's dangerous. The result is destruction. The son of Umar, the second Khalifa, was Abdullah bin Umar. It's narrated he came to the Imam and he advised him, why don't you compromise? Why don't you abandon this movement that you have begun? Why don't you return back to Medina? Be silent. Be in the company of your grandfather, the Holy Prophet's grave. Lead a life of silence and of piety. Do not give an opportunity to these evil ones to then overpower you and then to commit this massacre. Look at the well-wisher's advice. And then if you decide to keep quiet, we perhaps may manage to get an approval from them not to insist on forcing allegiance out from you. And that's a perception that you will note on many occasions from individuals who fail to realize the necessity of taking a stand and to be determined to live up to that principle. Look at Imam's response. Uffin li hadha al-kalam. Woe be to this advice. Abadan ma damat as-samawati wal-ard. Never till the end of the world can such an advice be acceptable. Tell me, Imam challenges Abdullah bin Umar, am I wrong in my opinion about this ruler? Am I wrong in my assessment of the evil in that allegiance that is forcing upon me? Oh, Abdullah bin Umar says, of course not. Allahumma la, of course not. How can ever the son of the daughter of the Prophet be wrong? There's no one in your degree of purity and perfection in the family of the Prophet. There's no doubt about the evil of the ruler. However, it's the sword, it's the death, it's the confusion and the commotion that you will cause in the community. Look at the Imam's education now and response to that idea. Hayhat, Ibn Umar. Let me tell you, O son of Umar, never will they abandon their drive to subjugate and to humiliate me. In their drive to establish evil, they need to quash any attempt to practice virtue. Let me remind you. And let me remind you of the disastrous effect. He quotes an interesting incident. Ibn Umar, let me tell you, إن من هوان الدنيا على الله أنه أتي برأس يحيى بن زكريا إلى بغية من بغايا بني إسرائيل. Let me remind you, one of the despicable characteristic, one of the scandals, one of those items which we should say shame to this world, was this historical fact that in the time of Bani Israel, the head of a prophet like Yahya bin Zakaria, John the Baptist, his head was presented as a prize to a prostitute. Amazing. When the aggressive tendencies in the human being go wild, when the passionate tendencies within the human being go wild, they can create disasters and scandals in the history of the world. And this particular assessment of the Imam is one reality that, interestingly enough, he repeats again and again. Let me quote a hadith narrated from the fourth holy Imam. He says, I was with him traveling with my father. And oftentimes during our journey to Karbala, he would recall and remind us about the incidents of Yahya bin Zakaria. Amazing. فما نزل منزلا ولا ارتحل منه إلا ذكر يحيى بن زكريا وقتله. And then one day he explained to us what happened. That the king at that time was approached by a prostitute, and they wanted to legitimize a sexual relationship within the boundaries of Mahramiyah, which is haram in the Sharia. They asked for the fatwa of approval and sanction from Yahya. Yahya bin Zakaria refused to grant and to legitimize an illegitimate sexual relationship. In revenge, this woman then sends the daughter who presents herself to the king and who wins him over. And she says, "What do you?" And he asks her, "What can I do for you?" And she says, "I want the head of Yahya bin Zakaria." And he says, "But no, ask for something else." He says, "No, nothing else. It's the head." And Imam concludes the story. He repeats the story several times. He concludes, he says, God then punished those people in such a way that almost 70,000 in that community were then killed by another king who came after him. And he says, in my case, true, the punishment will not fall upon the community immediately, but remember, amongst my progeny there will rise a son who will avenge my blood, inasmuch as Yahya bin Zakaria's blood was avenged. What's interesting for me is the fact that Imam kept on pointing to this direction, that sometimes sexual tendencies, when they're not bridled and they're not tamed and they're not controlled and they're not bound within the dictates of the superior intellect of the master of the universe, they can create disasters. If you want to identify one of the causes of Karbala, if this riwayah is to be accepted, where Imam keeps on reminding us of this incident of Yahya bin Zakaria, sexual energy, uncontrolled, can create disasters. Allow me to elaborate. There's no doubt that we're living in times where we're bombarded by sexual messages. Let me quote an example and then take it from there. Again, counselors who deal with problems that teenagers and young adults face report that one of the common problems is promiscuity and premarital sex. Look at this incident, for example. It's just an illustrative example. Julie was 17-year-old. She came to my counseling room and she was depressed. And she felt terribly guilty. The counselor's session is designed then to identify the cause of that depression. We spent a few sessions talking around these emotions. And finally, after several sessions, not in the first one, after several sessions, the real problem emerged. She was crying towards the end of that latter session, when 10 minutes remained before the end of the session. She began to tell me how she had a boyfriend and now she was sleeping around with him. She was madly in love with him, she told me. But then she was terribly burdened with this sexual activity. She felt guilty about it and therefore depressed. Worst, 3 weeks ago, before the session, she noticed that she missed her monthly period. She was scared to death that now she was going to become pregnant. After tests were conducted, it revealed that it was a false alarm. Wow. So she decided now to quit this intimate relationship that she had with her boyfriend. The problem is, despite sincere intentions for reformation, she found it impossible to quit. Excuse me. So she came to counseling for help. Her parents didn't know what was happening. Interesting. Her boyfriend didn't want her to come. But she was worried. She felt guilt. She wanted desperately to find out how she could quit, and she didn't know how to do it. Illustrative example. The counselor then sits down and analyzes, how could you ever have a problem like this? Would you be surprised with statistics which show that by the age of 20, almost 80% of males have already engaged in sexual activity? 70% of the females have already engaged in sexual activity by the age of 20. If you try to sit down and find out why it's happening, what is the cause of this sexual energy losing control, you find that, number one, the problem is we're living in a society where it's commercially viable to promote sex. It's profitable to promote sex. Adverts for anything. If it is somehow associated with a sexual message, it sells. So here you are, bombarded with adverts that promote sex, number one. Number two, teenagers are particularly vulnerable because they are now physically maturing and the hormones are now beginning to rage, and they're in a phase of experimentation. They're curious. They want to find out, what is all this about? They say sex is so great. What is it all about? And number three, the fact that the media, forget the adverts, even the media to which the teenagers are exposed, bombards them with sexual messages. In one study in the United States, they suggest that over a 10-year period, a young teenager would be exposed to almost 100,000 acts of sex on television. The problem is the sex that's portrayed, it's clean sex, it's risk-free sex, sex without pregnancy, sex without AIDS, sex without abortion, sex without any problem. Well, sex is glamorous. Number 4, it's not only the adverts, it's not only the media, it's peer pressure. You are macho if you engage in sexual activity. The female is liberated if she can engage in sexual activity. If you're a virgin, you're looked down upon. And you are assessed according to your sex track record. How many conquests have you made? Excuse me for this, but music. This counselor quotes a lyric. Sex is natural. Sex is good. Not everybody does it, but everybody should. When music can put you into a mood whereby now you're more receptive and responsive and suggestible to the messages that the lyrics give you, you can imagine that you have managed to convey your message right to the core and to the seat of the behavior of this individual. And these are the messages being conveyed. And of course, there may be certain individuals who are more vulnerable to sexual activity. For example, if they are basically, emotionally speaking, a teenager is at an age where he is seeking, he is looking for a relationship of belonging to, he's longing to belong to someone. Intimacy is part of the growth and it's part of the psychological requirement in a relationship. Having understood what the possible factors that influence increased sexual activity are, allow me, before I deal with the Quranic perspective on this, yet to quote another example. Incidentally, the same pressures that would apply to dating and to having sex in a date would also apply to exposure to drugs, would apply to exposure to drinks also. Again, let me quote an example. The counselor mentions a case. Matthew is 16. He was brought into my counseling room by his mother. She was tired of dealing with his drug abuse problems. Matthew's school was also threatening him with expulsion, unless, of course, if he secured immediate treatment for his drug problems. What happened was, in school he was caught drinking alcohol in the morning on school property 2 months ago. And then worst, recently the school authorities discovered that he's got marijuana in his locker. When confronted, he denies having a problem with either drinks or drugs. What's the problem with you? You think I've committed murder or what? Denies that he has a problem with drugs. But when challenged, he admitted, yes, now and then he did smoke marijuana. The disaster is here. As a young boy, Matthew was a good person. He had a pleasant personality. And now suddenly he's changed. And that's what was worrying the mother. And therefore she brought him to the counselor. What happened was, in school, he began to hang out with these young people whom his mother and father did not like. His mom reported and complained that he started to listen to loud music. And he begged and he begged and he pleaded to be allowed to go to this concert with his friends. And I just had to let him go, she admitted to the counselor. Then another problem and disaster struck the family. The parents got divorced. So now Matthew has less supervision on his life. He's a bit angry and frustrated also. They live in the same town, yes. They see each other occasionally, the father and the son. So in one of the sessions, Matthew's father also came along. He described that I saw Matthew and his friends, they were using an old rusted out van which is up a few blocks in the neighborhood's backyard, and that was their club, that was their drug club. And let me tell you, the father tells the counselor, you know what they did in that drug club, that van? They used to seal it up so that all the smoke of the drug should all concentrate in that. And Matthew was just listening and were rolling his eyes upward. Oh God. I would like to quote the confession of some of these teenagers. Look at this example. I don't think it even entered my parents' mind that I was a teenager drug abuser. They didn't even suspect me after he was caught. You know, they didn't even suspect almost for the past 2 years, almost every day I was high. I was getting high. I was into drugs. The reality is, again, because of the same factors that brings about sexual stimulation, peer pressure and promotion, and this tendency to experiment, exposure to drugs, researchers say, is something that every teenager will have to deal with willy-nilly. Parents can no longer have the luxury of thinking that, no, my son or daughter will not be exposed. The danger lurks out there. And it's destructive. If you look at the psychologist's categorization of the phases and the stages through which drug addiction passes through. Stage 1 is very innocent. It's just curiosity. It's just experimenting. I just want to find out what's the effect. Stage 2, they say, is now that you've used the drug and you've enjoyed the effects, stage 2 now is you learn to like the mood effects, the mood swing that you get out of the drug. But you're still not addicted. There's no problem. You can always withdraw. And besides, hey, you're just enjoying it. The only problem is sometimes you feel guilty about it. Stage 3, not only have you learned the mood swing out of the drug, but now you go and seek it out. So now your attendance in those drug parties is more regular. You enjoy the company of the drug users. You arrange to get the supply. You seek the mood swing now. And stage 4, you don't only seek the mood swing occasionally, you're now preoccupied with it. You're sinking now. Your whole life now is revolving around that activity. Everything is designed, everything revolves around that. And stage 5, finally, is the full addiction. You are not normal unless you get a dose. And no single dose is enough. You need harder doses. That's the full addiction. So you start as an experimenter, you continue as just a recreationist, you end up becoming an active seeker, and finally you become sick. That's the end result. If you look at the Quran, the manner in which it deals with this issue of sexuality. And remember, in the context of Karbala, uncontrolled sexual energy has the potential of creating a huge historical disaster. We need to appreciate, therefore, what the sexual energy is, what it can possibly do, and how are we supposed to, under God's guidance, supposed to control it. If you look at the Quran, number 1, in chapter 30, Surah Rum, ayah number 21, Allah informs us, instructs us, educates us that the sexual energy that you've been given, it's something good. It's wonderful. It's a gift to enjoy. You know why? Because the one who created it is the all good one, is the all perfect one, and therefore if he gives you anything, definitely it's good. Not only is good, it's a gift. And if it's a gift, You need to appreciate A, that it is something good, B, that there is a giver for this gift, and C, that the giver expects me to use it in a particular way. Chapter 30, ayah number 21, Allah says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. It's one of his signs. It's one of his expression of his love, of his wisdom, of his power, of his perfection, that he has given you this gift of companionship, of commitment in a marriage relationship, of passion. 3 ingredients mentioned in this ayah which ensure the success of a marriage. One is companionship. When you share values, your attitudes are common, your beliefs are compatible, your aspirations are almost the same. A, companionship. B, passion. That deep experience of sexual pleasure being shared and enjoyed with together. It's God's gift, which bonds you together, and therefore the third ingredient for the success of marriage, commitment. That the marriage is no longer your servant, that you are going to serve the purpose of the marriage to advance its cause. Number 1, therefore, the Quran educates us that this is a gift. Number 2, it warns us, it educates us that this gift has to be used only in the context of a marriage, not outside the marriage. So for example, in Surah Mu'minun, chapter 23, Allah describes the desirable characteristics that a believer has. Number 1, in his prayers, he's very humble. He's awed by the majesty of God. That's the sign of a true believer. Number 2, he avoids frivolous activities. Number 3, he is charitable, he's caring and concerned about those who are needy. Number 4, ayah number 5, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ, those who guard their private parts, إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ, save in a marital context, except in marital context. So, it's a gift, 1. It's a gift that's to be used as sexual energy within the marital context. 3, on a premarital level, Allah warns us, beware. This energy is so great, it's so tremendous. If you're not careful, it can harm you. Observe, in chapter 4, which is Surah Nisa, Allah discusses a list of almost about 13, 14 categories of women with whom we are not allowed to get married. And then it says, of course, you can engage in a temporary marriage relationship. And thirdly, if the situation is such that you cannot afford even to do that, then you're allowed to engage in sexual relationships with your slave girls under specific circumstances. But that is only in a situation where you cannot control your sexual desires. وَأَن تَصْبِرُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. However, if you do practice self-restraint and abstinence, that's the best for you, up until such time when you are capable of entering into a full marital relationship. This is chapter 4, ayah number 25. Ayah number 27. Interesting. Wallahu yuridu an yatuba alaykum. He sets the laws so that he may enable you to return back toward him, to enable you to get his grace and his mercy. In contrast, if you abandon the dictates of God, what happens? وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا. However, there are those who follow their lust. You know what they want from you? Those who follow their lust. They want you to deviate from this path in a deviation which is far away from the life of perfection. Once you become a slave to your lust. يريد الله أن يخفف عنكم. Allah wants to lessen the burden, that sexual pressure that you feel inside you. Follow these commandments that we've given you. وخلق الإنسان ضعيفا. And beware, man is weak. Man is weak. Look at this quotation. Lust is the ape that gibbers in our loins. Tame him we will by the day, but he rages all the wilder in our dreams by night. Just when we think we are safe from him, he raises up his ugly head and he smiles at us. And you know what? There is no river in the world which is cold enough and strong enough to strike this beast of love down. Almighty God! Incidentally, this is a Presbyterian minister who writes this. Almighty God, why did you deck men out with such a loathsome toy? The beast is raging and roaring in our loins. Which beast? The untamed beast? Well, Islam has laid down rules for you to subjugate and control that beast. It becomes a tamed animal. This complaint is from a person who fails to tame. It's impossible for God, out of His goodness, to energize us with a gift that can potentially destroy us without showing us a way to control it. It's a gift, one. It has to be used in the marital context, two. Beware, before marriage, the potential for disaster and destruction is there, three. Four, beware, Satan is out there specifically to entice you. Satan works at several levels. If you look at the Quran, Allah warns us. Satan first comes to deceive us, one. Two, then he seeks to dominate over us and therefore use our faculties for him. Three, having dominated us, then he disgraces us and degrades us. Three. Four, then he destroys us. Five, finally he dumps us. And all these 5 stages are mentioned in the Quran. Hopefully we'll come back to it. Chapter 24, that's Surah Nur, ayah number 33. Allah warns us about the potential for shaitan to destroy us through the sexual deviation. Allah says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, all those who believe, if you know there is a God, and if you know if that God is all good, and therefore He wants to guide you, well, beware, He is warning you here now. لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. Do not follow shaitan's insinuations. Why? ومن يتبع خطوات الشيطان فإنه يأمر بالفحشاء والمنكر. He will instruct you and command you, provided you obey him. He will force you to then engage in these heinous sexual crimes which violate God's laws. So there is a gift which is to be enjoyed in a marital context. We are warned that premarital or extramarital, the potential for danger is there. What's the solution? Of course marriage is a solution. Chapter 24, ayah number 30, Allah says, وَأَنْكِحُوا الْأَيَامَ مِنْكُمْ وَالصَّالِحِينَ مِنْ عِبَادِكُمْ وَإِمَائِكُمْ. Get them married. Get them married, the young ones. Incidentally, the youth is not told, go and get married. Somebody else is being told, get them married. Like who? Like parents? Like who? Like maybe those with power and authority in the community? Like who? Like maybe the powers that be in a state? They have to make arrangements for these young ones whose sexual energies are bubbling now to enable them, to direct them and channel them and control them within the context of marriage which Allah has designed. However, in order to ensure that this sexual energy then is controlled whether before marriage or within the context of the marriage, Allah then instructs us to carry out 5 things. Number 1, the women are supposed to observe a code of dress. Number 2, the contact of the eye between the two sexes has to be controlled. Number 3, the conversation, the content of the conversation has to be clean. Number 4, the character of the conversation. It should not be enticing sound. And number 5, no covetous, no coquettish behavior is acceptable from the women. Let me very quickly mention these ayah. The code of dress, the ayah in Surah Nur and in Surah Ahzab, which say that the women should cover themselves. The contact between the eyes. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, chapter 24, ayah number 30. The content of the conversation, Surah Ahzab, the instruction to the wives of the Prophet. And tell your wives, the Prophet is instructed, that when they converse and when they communicate with the others, with the other believers, chapter 33, ayah number 32, the one before the ayah of Tathir, Allah says, فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَا بِالْقَوْلِ, don't be soft in your voices and enticing. فَيَطْمَعَ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَضٌ, you will end up enticing one who is sick in his heart. God knows who is sick and who is healthy. But because the danger and risk is so high, it's safer to avoid this sort of conversation. وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, and when you speak, the content of your conversation should be clean. Be serious. Avoid entering into the domain of intimacy. And finally, وَلَا يَضْرِبْنَ بِأَرْجُلِهِنَّ لِيُعْلَمَ مَا يُخْفِينَ, even when they walk, if they have worn on their feet some anklets which can make some sound, let them not walk in such a manner as to attract attention. Within the marriage context, before the marriage context, these are some of the steps that Islam ensures that the sexual energy then is confined to the marital context, does not spill over into society. If, however, all these preventive steps do not work, finally you end up in a situation where you're confronted with a sexual temptation, then what should you do? A beautiful example is mentioned in Surah Yusuf. Surah Yusuf, the final confrontation that takes place between Yusuf and the wife of the governor, it's interesting. Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan says, if you look at the factors that would have led to the sexual consummation in that encounter, the factors are so great that if they were to be directed at a mountain, the mountain would crumble. Observe, he says, Yusuf was a man, and every man is attracted to a woman. Look at the prey, look at the predator, and look at the place. Yusuf was a man, and every man is attracted to a woman. 1. 2, Yusuf was not any man, he was a young man. The beast was raging in his loins, so to speak, potentially. 3, he was not an ordinary young man, he was a handsome young man. Look at the predator. She was not an ordinary woman. She came from a high family. Oh, prestige in a woman. 2, if she's the wife of the governor, definitely she was pretty. 3, she presented herself, and therefore she must have decorated herself. 4, she was seductive. 5, she was insisting. The place. She made sure the door is double locked. The curtains are drawn. She made sure she had things under control, that they enjoyed total privacy. Allama Tawadawai says, in fact, the only potential deterrents were, hey, we could be discovered. The woman was smart enough to ensure that that doesn't happen. Hey, the young man comes from a family which enjoys a high pedigree. He's the son of a prophet. Allama Tabatabai says that's no guarantee. Do you remember it was the other sons of the prophet who actually engineered his killing? All the factors were in place that if all those factors were to collect together and fall on a hard rock, the rock would be blown to smithereens. And yet this man won that war. How? If the Quran mentions it, we need to learn. Chapter 12, Surah Yusuf, ayah number 23. Allah says, remember the time when the door was double locked and privacy was ensured, and then she started running toward him. And you know what happened? Ayah number 23. وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا. And she made a proposal. وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. She double locked the doors. وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. And she said, come over. قَالَ. The response which Yusuf gives, three main factors he mentions which acted as a deterrent. قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ. 1. إِنَّهُ رَبِّي أَحْسَنَ مَثْوَايَ. 2. إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. 3. Number 1, I seek the protection of God. I recognize that I have sexual energy within me. I recognize that I can be weak against this onslaught of the sexual energy too. But I fully acknowledge that this is granted by God. 3. And I realize that God is all knowing of my predicament. 4. And therefore I can pray to Him for help. And I know God is all powerful, therefore He can help me if He wants to. And 5. He is all loving, definitely He wants to help me. The question is, do I want that help? Yes, ma'adallah. A'udhu billah. I seek the protection of God. It's interesting. In Surah A'raf, we're told that Shaitan is an enemy we cannot see. Therefore, he can ambush us and take us by surprise. Yet the Quran teaches us that there is a method whereby you can ambush Shaitan. You know how? You can take the help of a power that Shaitan cannot see. If you take the protection of God, God's knowledge, one who knows your predicament, and God's power who has the ability to help you, and God's love, His willingness is there to help you, definitely you win over. There's no way Satan or any other desire through which Satan may want to influence you can overpower you. Ma'adallah. 1. 2. Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. Secondly, not only do I want His protection, secondly, I recognize His provision. I was nothing. He created me. After creating me, He gave me the prestige of being the son of a prophet. He brought me up with this perfect training of the prophet. When I was about to die, He saved me. His bounties are numerous. I am a human being who is endowed with the faculty to recognize bounties when they're given to me. I realize that these bounties are from Him, and therefore I'm naturally thankful and grateful toward Him. And gratitude means I should not hurt His commands. 2. So it was protection from God. It was a reminder of the provision of God. And finally, it's the reminder of the punishment of God. Innahu la yuflihu dhalimun. I am raised to believe that God has created the universe in such a manner that there are laws. Inasmuch as there are physical laws, there are spiritual laws. And those spiritual laws state that whoever is a dhalim, whoever violates a divine law, then the forces of the universe will act in such a way that this man will never prosper and succeed. Indeed, the forces of the universe will come back to punish him. 3 major factors that protected Yusuf and ensured his prosperity. Of course, he ended up in the prison. But the prison turned out to be a garden where he could then guide so many other people. Finally, sexual energy, being a gift from God, therefore has the potential to enable us within the context of marriage and a legal relationship, to enable us to move toward perfection. Chapter 2, Surah Baqarah, ayah number 223, Allah says, Nisa'ukum harthul lakum. Your women are tilth unto you. Allah has designed the relationship between a man and a woman for procreation and for the continuity of the human race. فَأْتُوا حَرْثَكُمْ أَنَّا شِئْتُمْ. And therefore you are free to choose the time and the place whereby you'll engage in the relationship with your legal spouse in the marital context. وَقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ. However, you must use this opportunity to prepare for your own future. Look at the spiritual dimension of this sexual energy. 1. 2. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. And practice God consciousness. Recognize even during the sexual act that A, you are nothing before God. You're an empty receptacle. Whatever energy you have, it's God provided. A. B, when that pure, beautiful energy reaches you and expresses itself in the sexual domain and dimension, because it is good and because it is God provided, because it's a gift, therefore it has the potential to carry you, to change you, to progress you toward perfection. 2, wattaqullah, practice God consciousness. Do it in the context of God consciousness, even the sexual act. 3, Allah says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّكُمْ مُلَاقُوهُ. Remember, finally you shall meet him, therefore prepare for him, even through the sexual act. And 4, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And give glad tidings to the believers who then manage to appreciate the beauty of this sexual energy and then to channel and direct it in a path toward perfection. Karbala does afford us the opportunity to appreciate, in contrast, where on one side you have people who have failed to control their sexual energy, and on one side those who have directed it in God's path. Interestingly enough, Ali Akbar, the hero of our discussion tonight, there are differences of opinion. How old was he? Was he an old teenager, 17-year-old, 18-year-old? According to some reports, he was a young man, 25-year-old. However, we have no information about his marital status. We're not told about his wife or his children. There's some ziyarat where the imams have told us to address him, Assalamu alayka, wa ala abaika wa abnaika. Peace be upon you and your forefathers and your children. Interesting, Ali Akbar probably was already married and had children, according to this ziyarah at least. Of course, there are some who challenge and say, well, if he had children, how come we've checked all the Sadat and no Sayyid claims that his lineage goes back to him? But then there may be cases where the lineages may have stopped after a few generations and never continued. The interesting thing is this, that in as much as I mentioned in Surah Nisa, when Allah lists down the categories of women that we're not allowed to get married to, your mother, your sister, your aunt, list of about 13, 14 categories. And then he says, other than these women, you're allowed to get married. You're even allowed to enter into temporary relationship. But if a situation arises whereby you cannot engage, for whatever reason, a full relationship, you're even allowed to marry and have sexual relationship with your slave girl. Ali Akbar, it seems, did have access to a slave girl, at least according to one riwayah. Observe. In Wasa'il al-Shia, the chapter on Nikah, subsection 27, there are several traditions whose common theme is that the fourth holy imam was in Medina and he married a slave girl. The governor, Abdul Malik bin Marwan, had his spies who were watching the activities. They immediately reported to him. A complaint went, how could you ever stoop so low as to go and get married to a slave girl? And when there are so many other Quraysh women who come from families of prestige and honor. Imam's reply is interesting. He says that إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ فَوْقَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ مُرْتَقًا فِي مَجْدٍ. Don't give me any, no, I don't think so. There is an example for us, a role model better than that of the Holy Prophet. The Prophet married a slave woman. When the Yahud were captured, one of the ladies was Safiya bint Hay bin Akhtab, and the Prophet later married her. So what are you blaming me? And besides, this question of, oh, she's a free woman and not a slave and therefore honorable, and this one is a slave girl and therefore of a lowly status. No. قَدْ رَفَعَ اللَّهُ بِالْإِسْلَامِ الْخَسِيسَةِ. Honor and prestige is based on Islam. Even if you're a slave girl, but if you're a Muslim, you're better than a mushrik, though you may be very beautiful. You have more honor if you have Islam, though you're a slave. And then he says, let me give, and the other riwayah says that this is the 8th Holy Imam now. This is the defense of the 4th Holy Imam. The 8th Holy Imam was told that we heard that your grandfather, Ali, son of Hussein, may peace be upon them both, he married the daughter of Hassan, and he also married the slave girl of Hassan. How could that be possible? And the 8th Holy Imam explains, إِنَّمَا تَزَوَّجَ عَلِيُّ بْنُ الْحَسَنِ ابنة الحسن وأم ولد لعلي بن الحسن المقتول عندكم. What happened was the slave girl was married by Ali, son of Hussein, not the one who survived, but the one who was killed. This is one side of the story. Sexual energy uncontrolled. Look at the complaint which Imam Hussein made against Yazid, that he's a drunkard and he doesn't even observe sexual relationships within the divine laws. Look at the battle cry, Hayhata minna dhilla, of Imam Hussein, that this illegitimate son who has now been given power in society wants to subjugate me. Look at the battle cry of Ali ibn al-Hussein, Ali Akbar himself, when he went to the battlefield. Ana Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali. If you don't know me, let me introduce me. I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali. Nahnu wa baytillah awla bin nabi. If there's a question of political authority, when the qualification necessarily and surely is with those who are from the household of the Prophet. Tallahi la yahkumu fina ibn al-da'i. Never ever will this illegitimate son who doesn't even bother about the sexual relationships in his society, never ever will he rule over us. Look at the contrast and the confrontation. Ali Akbar enjoyed a special status with Imam Ali, with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. When the qafila towards the beginning of Muharram arrived at a place known as Qasr Bani Muqatil, the Rawi says, I recall very clearly that we were moving slowly and Imam dozed for a little while and then he woke up and he says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And then he repeated this several times. We are from God and we are going back to Him, and all praise belongs to God and God alone for whatever He wills for us. And when he repeated this several times, Ali Akbar races forward to join his father, and then he inquires from him that is there any problem? And Imam Hussein explains that the dream that I saw when I was asleep, I heard a voice saying that this caravan is moving, but death is following behind them. And I interpreted this to mean that we are now very fast approaching death. So Ali Akbar inquires, Alasna ala haqq, but are we not on the righteous path? Death is definite for everyone. You can't escape that. The important thing is, how do you die and why do you die? But isn't our goal and our purpose in life very clear? Aren't we moving in the right direction? And Imam assures him, of course we're in the right direction. So Ali Akbar then says, إِذَنْ لَا نُبَالِي. And therefore we are not bothered whether we meet death or death comes to us. We're prepared, we're ready. If a Muslim recognizes the reality that the first thing that he will be asked after death by the angels, by the command of God, is, what have you brought? What actions have you done? How have you handled your wealth? How have you spent your time? How was your relationship to the godly sent guides? If these four basic questions are going to be asked from us, and the Muslim is already prepared, he knows who his guide is, he knows how he has spent his time and his treasures and his talents, what is he worried about? He's ready to meet death anytime. And Allah's Imam Hussein praises Ali Akbar, saying that Jazakallahu khairan. He acknowledges that this young man's viewpoint, world viewpoint, is mature and totally Islamic. On the day of Ashura, notice that all the companions proceeded to offer their sacrifice. The members of the household of Bani Hashim were the last ones to advance. The companions had made an agreement that so long as we are alive, neither the Imam nor the members of the household of the Imam shall go to the battlefield. When the last companion falls, the Maqtal history narrates for us that the children of Bani Hashim who were in the camp of Imam Hussein, that means the sons of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and the sons of Imam Hassan, and the sons of Aqil, and the sons of Jaffer, and of course the sons of Imam Hussein himself, they all gathered. فَاجْتَمَعُوا وَأَخَذَ يُوَدِّعْ بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا. They knew now the end is near. They began to say farewell to each other. A group who had dedicated themselves to God, and now they knew they had to face death. Before they met their end, they are bidding farewell to each other. Having done that, amongst the members of the household, the first one then to advance was Ali Akbar. You know, in the Quran, there's a lot of recommendation that those individuals who are believers, they should try to compete with each other to advance towards perfection. وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ فِي جَنَّاتِ النَّعِيمِ. Those who are foremost in their understanding of the truth, one, in their acceptance of the truth, two, in their action on the truth, three, they are the ones who are close to God. The first person who comes to Imam Hussein amongst the members of the household is Ali Akbar. History tells us that for other cases, Imam hesitates, Imam refuses to grant permission. But there's one exception. When Ali Akbar comes, فَاسْتَأْذَنَ أَبَاهُ فَأَذِنَ لَهُ. The moment he asks for permission, Imam Hussein grants it. Amazing. This young man is not an ordinary man. When Ali Akbar prepares to go to the battlefield, Imam makes a prayer. Allow me to quote that prayer, whereby, number one, he praises Ali Akbar. Number two, he prays against the people who are now bent on killing his son. And number three, in his prayer, he specifically targets Umar Sa'ad. And number four, he declares an ayah of the Quran. When Ali Akbar proceeds to the battlefield, Imam Hussein alayhi salam lifts up his white beard towards the heaven. Incidentally, his beard had already gone white. There were occasions when some people came to him and he said, "Oh, you've grown old." And he says, "Well, we inherit, Bani Hashim, we've inherited the white beard." He took his white beard, he faced it towards the heaven, and he said, "Allahumma ishhad ala ha'ula'i al-qawm qad baraza ilayhim ghulamun ashbahu an-nas khalaqan wa khuluqan wa mantiqan bi rasulika Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi." Oh Allah, look at the predicament of this community of believers, that now a situation has arisen whereby this young man who resembles the Prophet in his person, in his physical appearance, in his personality, in his speech, the most close in his resemblance, is now proceeding toward them. We are going to lose him. Oh Allah, I only complain to you and to you alone about the depravity of these enemies. كنا إذا اشتقنا إلى نبيك نظرنا في وجهه. Whenever we wanted to see the Prophet, we used to look at Ali Akbar. Allahumma, oh Lord, how could a people be so low and so merciless as to want to commit this heinous crime? Oh Lord, you have created the universe in such a way that you respond positively and you bless and you help those who move toward you. They have deprived themselves of your mercy. Oh Lord, I pray to you, block your blessings from them. Allahumma imna'hum barakatil ard. Allahumma farriqhum tafriqa wa mazziqhum tamziqa. Oh Allah, spread discord and disunity amongst this community. Who fails to recognize who you are, who fails to identify who your righteous leaders are, who doesn't even have the dedication and the devotion to accept the truth, who just follow their desires. Oh Allah, deny them your mercy. Oh Allah, not only should you restrict your resources from this community, oh Allah, don't only bring about disunity amongst them, but their rulers make them disgusted with them. وَلَا تُرْضِ الْوُلَاةَ عَنْهُمْ أَبَدًا. You know why? فَإِنَّهُمْ دَعَوْنَا فَلَمْ يَنْصُرُونَا. They called us. They invited us. They said, we are ready to help you. When we came, they're abandoning us. And then he targeted Ibn Sa'ad specifically. Ibn Sa'ad, we belong to the same clan. Ibn Sa'ad's forefathers at one point reaches Abd Manaf. At one level, Imam Hussein and Ibn Sa'ad belong to the same clan. Inasmuch as you are severing and cutting off the relationship and bonding of proximity that we have, I pray God also punishes you for that. Not only that, I pray that you are slaughtered on your bed. Not only that, I pray that just like you are denying us the presence of this young man, may Allah sever his blessings from you. And finally, Imam Hussein recites one ayah that portrays the supreme status of this young man. Inna Allah astafa Adama wa Nuhan wa ala Ibrahim wa ala Imran ala al-alamin dhurriyatan ba'duha min ba'd wallahu sami'un alim. Allah in His grace looks at mankind, those who are potentially good and who will respond when helped by becoming even more good. Allah selects them to become chosen people. And therefore Allah has chosen Nuh, and Allah has chosen Adam, and Allah has chosen the sons of Ibrahim, and Allah has chosen the sons of Imran. And this boy is a chosen man. If he were to be alive, perhaps he could have achieved a level of isma. He's not an ordinary young man. And therefore the grievousness and the gravity of the loss and the grief that Imam will experience. The young man comes to the battlefield. He declares his position. What is his personality? 1. What are his political views? 2. And what is his perseverance in his fight against injustice? 3. Look at him. Ana Ali ibn al-Husayn ibn Ali. I am Ali, son of Hussein. Not biologically only, I am his son spiritually. I've gained my personality from him. I'm Ali, son of Hussein, son of Ali. I'm the grandson of Ali, not biologically only, but spiritually also. Look at my character, look at my views, look at my person. Tell wa baytillahi, and I swear by God, nahnu wa baytillah awla bin nabi. If you're looking for a person who should become your righteous leader, there's no doubt that the members of the household of the Prophet, because they have been raised in an environment of purity and perfection, they are more deserving to become the political authority in a society. Not this despot. Tallahi la yahkumu fina ibn ad-da'i. Well, let me tell you, We will never allow this illegitimate son to exercise his authority in our society. أضربكم بالسيف. I will strike with my sword. أحمي عن أبي. And I'll protect my father. Not because he's my father, because he represents the truth and he's the only man alive who's the righteous chosen leader today. ضرب غلام هاشمي علوي. And my strike, you will notice, will be with the same force and with the same bravery as all the other Bani Hashim, and especially that of Ali. And he fought bravely. But remember one thing, this was the first man coming out from the family of Bani Hashim. Which member of the Bani Hashim, the direct son of Hussein, the target of the enemies? If they want to hit anyone, this is the man. If they want to target anyone, this is the son. That's the one to be hit. And he fought bravely. They could not hurt him. The man fought so bravely. It's amazing. He's one of those few fighters who stops and comes back. And he complains to his father, I fought, but I'm a little tired now. I'm a little thirsty. If I can just get a little water, I can continue with even more force. Imam says, Ya bunayya, ya'izzu alayya an tad'uni fala ujibuk. You have asked me for help, but of something that I cannot help you with. However, there's a strange behavior the Imam does. Number one, it is said he gave him his ring. He says, put this in the mouth. Perhaps the stone of the ring is such that it stimulates some saliva to flow, and maybe that will relieve that thirst that you have. But a second strange behavior is reported, and that is the Imam stuck his tongue out and he says, touch my tongue. Ali Akbar physically touches with his tongue the tongue of his father. Strange behavior. In the past history, there was one other incident where this took place, and that was the Prophet with Imam Ali. This is not a question of perhaps a physical tongue touching another drier tongue and then experiencing, this is even drier than me, what can I ask for? No. These human beings were so high and so close to God that their spirituality dominated their physicality. That was a symbolical statement of the transfer of the divine strength from the father to the son. The son goes back. And now he fights even more bravely after that contact where he received not a single drop of water. And he comes back and he fights. Imam prays for him. Imam assures him, don't worry. I pray to God. And la tumsi hatta yasqika jadduka bika'sihi al-awfa. Sharbatan la tadhma'u ba'daha abadan. I pray to God that before the sun sets, that you shall meet your grandfather. And when you meet your grandfather, he shall make you drink from the goblet of Kawthar. And when you drink from that, your thirst will be quenched in such a way that you will never become thirsty ever again. He goes and he fights bravely. However, the enemy is dastardly, the enemy is cowardly. There's one who ambushes him. There's one who comes and approaches him from behind and strikes him on his head. Ali Akbar loses balance. Unfortunately, in that incident, what happens is his head now falls on the horse. The horse meanders and drifts and goes even into the enemy circle further. And remember, the enemy is targeting Hussein, but right now he is the representative of Hussein. And they attack him ferociously. فَقَطَّعُوهُ بِسُيُوفِهِمْ إِرْبًا إِرْبًا. They chop him up to pieces. Amazing. Where is the conscience? Where is the integrity of a person? This is after Dhuhr. At Dhuhr time you prayed. You are a Muslim. You prayed to God and you said, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And here was a man who is representative of the Prophet in his physical appearance, in his person, in his personality. Whenever they wanted to see the Prophet, they would look at him. And yet you hit him and you chopped him and you severed him and you killed him. Are you a Muslim? Are you a human? Or you're a degraded animal whose desires have taken control over you to such a way that you're blind. You are blind. That's the tragedy of Karbala. And that's the heroism of people like Ali Akbar. Imam Hussein rushes to the battlefield when Ali Akbar cries out, Alayka minni salam ya abatah. My final farewell greetings to you, O my father. Imam Hussein rushes to the battlefield, but of course it's late. The enemies have already done their dastardly, cowardly job of killing. Ali Akbar makes one statement which is amazing. He says, Father, I can now see my grandfather and he's feeding me from that goblet of the Kawthar, and now I can experience my thirst being quenched. Whenever an individual reaches on his deathbed, he's about to leave the physical world and now he's about to enter that higher realm of perfection of barzakh, his interests and his concerns in the physical world are then forgotten. It's not a question of physical water being given to him in barzakh. It's a thirst that is being quenched, which will never come back to haunt him, because spiritually the man was thirsty and longing for perfection, and now he's meeting his Lord. And that meeting in itself is quenching his thirst for perfection, and therefore he'll never become thirsty again. That is the Hawd al-Kawthar. That is the goblet, the cistern of Kawthar. That's an attainment and achievement for Ali Akbar. But focus your attention on the members of the household. Focus your attention on Imam Hussein. He's lost this hero. He's lost this symbol of purity and perfection. And Imam cries. He says, "Ala dunya ba'daka al-afa." Life in your absence now is miserable, Ali Akbar. And Imam prays, "Qatalallahu qawman qataluk." These people fail to recognize who you are. May Allah punish them. Ma ajra'ahum ala ar-Rahman. How could they be so daring against God, against the Prophet, against Ali? And when the body is brought back to the camp, the ladies of the household cry, Wa Aliyah, wa thamarata fu'adah. It's not difficult to imagine why any human being would experience this degree of grief and sense of loss. Assalamu alayk ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik wa anakhat birahlik. Alaykum minna jami'an salamullah abadan ma baqina wa baqiya al-layl wa an-nahar. Wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullah.